You're listening to The Alex Jones Show.
Big Brother, mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
Hour number 3, Sheriff Richard Mack's our guest, a man of action. Got the Brady bill shot down. Supreme Court founded the only widespread patriot sheriff and police organization that's actually having a big effect. He's our guest. I want to go to your calls. He wants to talk about the one-year anniversary of the Bundy Ranch historic event. We'll roll some of that video in the background. You can see the historic Feds surrender video at Infowars.com. We're going to go to Ross, Brandon, Tim, Mike, Mark, and others before we get into that. And Mark in Texas has a question for the sheriff. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, Sheriff. I'd like to ask, you're a real patriot, and I have so much respect for you and all that. And what's said about your heart attack and all that, and not having health insurance, I'd like to know how. I'd like to make some kind of a contribution. I don't have a lot of money, but I'd like to make some kind of a contribution. I try to contribute to things like this and to... Well,
that's right. I mean, all the anti-gunners get hundreds of millions a year from Bloomberg and Soros to try to unelect sheriffs and stuff. And then people like, Mac, they just try to sell enough books to travel around the country and fund their organization. So just like we need people to buy stuff from us, you fund us, we will build an operation to attack the globalists, and we have. And it's the same thing. So where do people donate, Mac?
I
think we're losing his Skype. Okay, well we've been having some feed issues there with him. So we're can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, the caller was asking where people can donate.
Okay, if you want to do for the medical, there's a GoFundMe site put up by some friends of mine. If you want to help us with that, that's been really a miracle for us. It's GoFundMe.com/help Sheriff Mack. GoFundMe.com/help Sheriff Mack. That's been very interesting. You ought to look at that. But if you want to just donate to CSPOA, become a life member, or just make a donation, just go to CSPOA.org.
And I know I've been out to your place out in Fredericksburg when you lived in Texas for a while. You're a very humble guy, and you're running a big organization and not even really paying yourself anything. So God bless you, brother. We really appreciate that. Mark, hope that answers your questions. Anything else you'd like to ask Sheriff Mack?
Yeah, the other thing, Sheriff, is being a former peace officer myself, I'm very disturbed when I see, I've got to the point where I tell people I'm ashamed I ever wore a uniform or a badge. That's how bad it's getting when I see some of the things going around the country. But you give me new hope. You give me pride in having worn a badge. What I wanted to ask is, how can I approach other people? When I see a police officer or peace officer of any kind, is there any way of approaching these people and saying, hey, man, you want to be part of the American
That's
people?
a great way. Yeah. I mean, if you had 60 seconds to break the ice, hey, there's a lot of patriot police and sheriffs now. Are you aware of the struggle for the republic? I mean, I think that's how I would open it up. What do you say, Sheriff?
Basically the same thing, and hand them either one of our CSPOA pamphlets, which we're right now redoing, and we can get you a bunch of those. So call me on the line at the CSPOA, email me or whatever. Alex's people have my information too, and hand them the book, The County Sheriff, America's Last Hope. It's only 50 pages, real easy to get, or even better now, the sequel, Are You a David? Every peace officer in this country needs to answer that question. Are you a David? Are you willing to take on Goliath? Do you have the courage to interpose between the citizens and tyrannical government?
And the reason they're so scared at the ADL and Southern Poverty Law Center of you, I mean, you're like their main enemy now, is because you are credible, you have a great history, you've been successful at the Supreme Court, and all you're doing is putting out the Constitution, and now hundreds of new sheriffs join you every few months, and police and others. We're talking about actual sheriffs, not just sheriff's deputies. And when there's so many of you now, they can't just target a few to scare everybody off, plus they can't scare you. And so they just hope that it'll all go away. It's not going to. We're going to talk to Ross, Brandon, Tim, Mike, and others straight ahead. I'm Alex Jones. But Sheriff Mack is our guest. If you just joined us, he's the guy that beat the Brady Bill at the Supreme Court and has written a bunch of just amazing books, leads a movement to get sheriffs and police to commit to the Constitution and organize to defend each other when they're attacked for following their oaths. He's taken action. He's our guest. I want to go back to your phone calls here. Phil, and then Ross, and Brandon, and Tim, and Mike, and everybody else that's holding with Sheriff Richard Mack. But what do you make of it? Because as radical as I used to sound talking about stuff, now it's all come out, so I'm not that radical. Truth is, I was never really radical. I was just covering the truth. People didn't know about it, so it sounded crazy. But now it's known NATO funded al-Qaeda against Syria, and then they changed their name to ISIS. It's known Hillary shipped the missiles up to Turkey to give them to the folks in Syria. And then she's asked about it in Congress, and she makes a joke and goes, a turkey? What do you mean a turkey? A bird? I played that clip earlier. Just the craziness of the president opening the borders and ordering the Border Patrol to give them vouchers and ship illegals in. And just all of it is so illegal, I think. What's next? I mean, more tyranny in a month than we'd see in years. What do you expect to see happen next, Sheriff?
Of all the subterfuge that you've pointed out and that I've pointed out and that you and I both have been assailed for, we look more prophetic every day, don't we, when we discover these things. But, Alex, the sad thing of it is we have only discovered and exposed about 1/10 of what's really going on. The dangers and perils at our border and the subterfuge and the corruption behind all of this that's going on internationally and at our own borders is 10 times worse than what you have exposed and what I've talked about.
That's what I always say, is people think I exaggerate, then later it comes out it's worse. Generally, as you know, in criminology, I guess things are usually 5, 10, 15 times worse than what you know. And exactly, if it's this bad and we know, then how much worse is it really?
It's a lot worse, and I believe that they don't care now what we know. They think they can get away with anything, and I'm betting that the sheriffs and peace officers of this country will stand and stop this. And again, in a peaceful, effective way.
Well, look at the conspiracy. They militarize, federalize police, start doing psychologicals in the last 20 years to hire thugs. They then protect them, take over departments. When they get in trouble, they federalize the department, which has followed the globalist programming. Then the police get hated by the public. They go into their own gang mentality. Their journey towards darkness is complete. You and I and many others are battling for that heart and soul of the peace officer. As Jack McClam would always say, tyranny will come to your door in a uniform, but liberty can as well. That fight is happening now.
It is, and we're really needing everybody's help to take that battle to our nation's police and our sheriffs. And it's amazing that we're having examples every day of sheriffs and chiefs of police stand. Chief James Craig from Detroit has actually said that gun ownership and gun owners has decreased crime in that once crime-ridden area that never saw a decrease in crime.
Chicago just saw a drop after a few concealed carries got issued, a few hundred. I mean, it's incredible.
It really is.
What about the fella in New Mexico you were talking about and others? There's all these sheriffs and police chiefs. I mean, we actually put up the Albuquerque headline, police chief stands up to IRS, or sheriff does. I mean, this is really happening. Sheriff
London in Eddy County, where Carlsbad Caverns is located, he has taken a strong stand against the IRS. And he's the one that has somewhat fired the first shot on this issue. And we've already been talking about this issue with many of our sheriffs and our CSPOA staff. And we're going to make this our calling card. We've got to stop this. Congress won't do it. The president, of course, is promoting it. And we're going to do everything we can to protect the people of this country. And let's be clear, when the feds show up without warrants, or the or the IRS shows up without warrants to grab a bank account or somebody's house, it's the sheriff's job. And by the way, it's been sheriffs in Florida and constables when Bank of America, remember, got caught taking houses they never even had a deed to that were paid off
The sheriffs went and said, no, we're now taking your bank, and went in and were taking cash out of the registers when they wouldn't pay the money back court order, and so the bank finally wrote a check. But I mean, that's an example of the police doing, they'll be loved if they started doing the right thing.
And I talk about Sheriff Tom Dart from Chicago, who isn't even a constitutional sheriff, but he stood against the big banks and stopped foreclosures in his county. And he did the right thing just because he saw an abuse. He's not on our list, hasn't been in any of our training, but that's what we're really after. We're after behavioral change from our nation's police and sheriffs, and he is another example.
Well, exactly, and sheriffs are under tremendous pressure. He's black, he's a Democrat, but he will give to ICE aggravated felons. I mean, he should be given all the illegals they pick up for even petty crimes to be. But he's only deporting 10 or so a week, 15 a week, 5 a week. It varies. They're trying to unseat him right now with Bloomberg money in Austin because he would just take a rapist to be deported. I mean, it's insane.
And that's another issue. Sheriff Clark from Milwaukee,